talk about the top 5 advancers in their disease in 2015. And I noticed I wasn't asked that, and that's probably because in a rare disease like mesothelioma, there aren't any, aren't 5 at least, but there are a few. So, and there are a number of key challenges involved in moving forward in mesothelioma. For chemotherapy, the standard of care has not changed in over a decade. Looking at Jeff Crawford's list of how many new drugs there are in lung cancer, it's really embarrassing that we have had no changes in all that time. But this may change very soon. And unfortunately, there are very few actionable targets. There's no EGFR or EML4 ALK in mesothelioma. And trials in a rare disease can be very challenging to accrue. The disease is not only rare, but it's regional. There are some areas that have a lot of mesothelioma and some that see none. The disease is difficult to measure and assess, and it's almost impossible to stage, though we are trying to revise the staging system. And the potential market is small, although as larger diseases like lung cancer fracture into smaller and smaller diseases, companies are seeing the value of even rarer diseases like mesothelioma. I won't have a chance to talk about surgery, radiation, or screening, but there the roles are undefined, controversial, and really we don't know what to do. I'd like to emphasize again that no drugs have been approved for mesothelioma. This pivotal trial was completed by my former mentor, Nick Vogelsang, in 2003. Thus, the only drug available for this disease is pemetrexed. Now, I'm also a pancreatic cancer doctor, and this is slightly better than a pancreatic cancer curve, but really not that much. We've got an improvement in median survival of only 3 months and improvement in time to progression by 2. We really should be able to do better, yet we haven't moved the bar very far in quite some time. There are a few things we don't know even about the use of pemetrexed. Should we use cis or carboplatin? Well, cis is unfortunately the regulatory standard in a disease where the median age is 74. And carbo and PEM has similar activity, though we only know this from non-randomized data from extended access database and single-arm phase 2 trials. We frequently use it in older patients, but because it's not used in trials, it makes it difficult to accrue. I just can't put my 85-year-old patients on a PEM-CIS plus or minus new drug extra. Now, is there any data to support maintenance pemetrexed? And I would clearly say not yet. Extrapolating from lung cancer, I can't tell you how many doctors will offer maintenance pemetrexed. Yet there is no data. In the pivotal randomized study, patients received no more than 6 cycles of chemotherapy. In a small non-randomized single-arm Dutch study, maintenance PEM following PEM platinum was well tolerated. Responses occurred after 6 cycles, and that's all we know. So we have this CALGB trial that has been aiming to answer this question about pemetrexed maintenance. It's past the interim analysis, but it's really limping along in terms of accrual because most people think they know the answer, and yet I don't think the answer is known. So the current paradigm for frontline drug development for mesothelioma kind of parallels those old gemcitabine plus or minus your new drug studies from pancreas cancer. PEM-CIS plus or minus your new drug here. And there are a number of ongoing frontline trials. I mean, this isn't a lung cancer list, but we've been, looking at a number of PEM-CIS plus or minus drug X trials in phase 1B, 2, and 3, principally targeting mesothelin, VEGF, CSF1R, HSP90, PI3K, mTOR. Now, looking at VEGF, this is probably the most extensively studied area, and really I thought we'd given up on it years ago because there were so many, mainly single-arm negative trials and a few randomized trials. Then came, finally this year in Advance, the first positive randomized trial since pemetrexed was approved. This is the MAPS trial. It was an open-label trial of PEM-CIS-BEV versus PEM-CIS. It was a phase 2-3. The primary endpoint of the phase 2 was PFS, and then OS in the phase 3. Now, being that this is a European trial, they had a cutoff of age of 76, so this is 75. So this is a younger trial group than we would expect in the U.S. And the patient characteristics were well balanced and what you would basically expect for a regimen that was limited to patients who could tolerate bevacizumab. here you can see the progression-free survival curves. Notice that this was an unblinded trial, and so there's always a little wiggle room in a disease that's hard to measure, but still, the curves look pretty respectably different, about 2 months with a hazard ratio of 0.6. I've got to squint a little bit more to see the overall survival curves, but again, a 2.7-month improvement in overall survival, something we've never seen in this disease before. So how do we place this trial in context? Well, the addition of Bev to pemetrexed and cisplatin significantly improves progression-free and overall survival, yields an expected manageable increase in toxicity, does not produce a detrimental effect on quality of life. It doesn't improve it, but it doesn't make it worse. Interestingly, the authors did not provide any data on response. Now, the authors tell me that the publication is due to come out imminently in the Lancet, so hopefully we'll learn about whether or not it improves response, but right now we don't know. So the authors of this trial concluded that this triplet is a new treatment paradigm for pleural meso patients eligible for Bev who are not amenable to curative surgery, whatever that is in your definition. But what's interesting in this trial is look at the median survival in the control arm. It was 16 months, yet in the pivotal phase 3 trial from Vogelsang, it was only 12 months. Why is that? They thought that the longer than expected survival might be due to the eligibility criteria for bevacizumab, or potentially other things that we're doing in terms of treatment these days, such as retreatment with pemetrexed on progression. I didn't do that. Okay. But the key question is, do the results of this MAP trial change the standard of care for mesothelioma? Well, the NCCN seems to think so. And certainly Genentech will be, my understanding is that they will be filing for this. I think it is a reasonable option for a select group of patients, but it clearly is not going to be applicable to all. And again, we have had few things moving forward, so this is exciting, but we still need to do more. And another question is how adding bevacizumab fits into our current paradigm for frontline meso trials. Many of which are PEM-CIS plus or minus your new drug here. Do we have to add bevacizumab to the arms of all trials? Since most patients can't tolerate bevacizumab and since many countries will not approve it, should we have to stratify for bevacizumab use? And the latter is my understanding what the FDA is planning in some future mesothelioma trial. Now, unlike the more readily targetable oncogenic driver mutations seen in lung cancer, the most common somatic genetic alterations in meso are tumor suppressive, and these are BAP1, NF2, and CDKN2A. And they're really less easily druggable, with one exception, which was NF2. And that was the COMMAND trial whose data came out this year. This was a double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized phase 2 trial of VS6063, which is a FAK inhibitor. And here the rationale was that deletion or mutation of the NF2 tumor suppressor is found in 40 to 50% of meso, and it results in a lack of expression of functional myelin protein. And at least in vitro in mesothelioma cell lines that lacked NF2 myelin were thought to be especially sensitive to FAK inhibition. And that data, in the absence of any clinical data, led to this trial of PEM-CIS or PEM-carbo, followed by maintenance FAK inhibitor or placebo with patients stratified by myelin status. It was unfortunately closed for futility at interim analysis. Likely, they did not have enough good preliminary data. Back to the drawing board. So what about second-line chemotherapy? Well, there's only one drug frontline, and there are no drugs approved second-line. Pemetrexed retreatment, just like in small cell lung cancer, you give etoposide again. Well, in meso, pemetrexed retreatment provides durable disease control in pemetrexed-sensitive patients, and you can retreat and retreat and retreat. Now, vinorelbine and gemcitabine are both widely used, but there are no published randomized studies of either agent in the second-line setting. And most data is derived from a single-center phase 2 trial of vinorelbine in pemetrexed-naive patients, or from single-center retrospective series of both drugs. And response rates are quite low, as are the PFS, yet that is our standard. So this trial. This is the phase 3 trial of vorinostat versus placebo, previously treated patients based upon a 10-patient phase 1 trial. They went straight from phase 1 to phase 3. Now, this is the largest trial ever performed in meso. And on a previous talk, someone was showing 1,100 patient trials in lung cancer, 2,000 patient trials in lung cancer. Our largest trial was 661 patients. It took 125 centers in 23 countries 5.5 years to enroll to this trial, and it was negative. But it serves as a benchmark for designing the next generation of trials in this disease. And clearly, the curves look exactly like a pancreatic cancer superimposable curve. But at least we can see what the placebo, survival, and PFS is, and that is helping us design future trials. Now, when you have a hot drug, it is a lot easier to accrue to a trial faster. And so the DETERMINE trial, which again was in previously treated patients, this is a CTLA-4 agent of tremelimumab versus placebo, this trial accrued in a year. The data is expected imminently. And so hopefully it will be coming, if positive, to a plenary session near you. We'll just have to see. But it could lead to a new FDA-approved indication for previously treated meso. So what are the most promising drug classes of the moment for mesothelioma? I would say there are two. Agents targeting mesothelin, and there are multiple drugs in phase 1, 2, and 3 trials. And really, this whole field has been led by Rafiq Hassan. And since he's speaking on his Saturday afternoon, I won't steal his thunder, and I'll let him talk to you about it. The other class of drugs are, of course, the checkpoint inhibitors. And yes, they actually do have quite a bit of activity in meso, and for a small disease, we're actually doing a lot with them. And I'll let you see my talk on Saturday morning so you can find out more. But I will let you know that substantial activity has been observed with both classes of drugs. So moving forward, yes, the standard of care chemo for meso has not changed for over a decade. But fortunately, it is an exciting era for new drug development in this disease. For once, we do have a wealth of potential agents with real activity and a biologic rationale. So hopefully soon we can begin moving forward to make progress against this terrible disease. And with that, I will thank you from our mesothelioma program at the University of Chicago.
Specimens?
So there was a window of opportunity trial led by Rafael Bueno in which patients got initially a very brief period, I believe 2 weeks worth of the FAK inhibitor, and he did PET scans pre and post and actually saw activity of the drug in sarcomatoid mesothelioma patients. Just the fact that he was operating on sarcomatoid is interesting, but he did see a drug effect. And this actually led our group to write a trial of the FAK inhibitor in sarcomatoid meso. My fellow got a Vail visit out of it. But unfortunately, the company is now really pulling back on mesothelioma because of their negative randomized phase 2 trial. So that isn't moving forward. But I think Rafael's trial did set a new approach for window of opportunity trials. We actually have 2 of them at the University of Chicago. And so I think that is a nice approach for developing drugs in meso, but that one is not moving forward. Yes?
Yeah, 2 questions. First is on the BEV trial, did they allow maintenance BEV after the 6 cycles of PEMSIS?
Yes, so there was maintenance BEV on the BEV arm, and then it was surveillance on the non-BEV arm.
Yeah. And what was interesting when you looked at the curves, it really looked like they were very overlapping, almost 6 to 10 months, and then they really split. So they kind of split late. So do you have any thoughts on it? Is it that it's just, progression and, is hard to determine in mesothelioma and therefore it may not have represented really what was happening biologically? Or what's your thoughts on that? Because it seemed like those curves stayed on top of each other almost out to 10 months and then split very nicely.
But, the numbers are much lower at that level, and so it's difficult to know. I think once we have the manuscript and we have all of the data, it's going to be a lot easier to analyze. There was symmetry in terms of the second-line treatments that were offered on the 2 arms, so I don't think that was it. I don't know much about salvage surgery that was done on either of the arms. So I think we just need to have a little bit more data before we can know.
Next is Dr. David P.